12-player Space Marine 2 is amazing. Okay, so there's a great clip of 12 players jumping into an operation. I have a lot of questions, and I also kind of have some points here I kind of want to make about this. But ultimately, I just want to provide this statement right here. This game probably can be a lot better than we expect. I know a lot of people, criticize the game for whatever reasons, but ultimately, I didn't even know 12-player Space Marine 2 was possible, even with mods, and I have to admit that is very impressive. I wish we had, modes in this game that could allow for 12 players or something like that, you know what I mean? But regardless, this does show that the systems are there in the game to support something like this, to make sure that we can have matches or modes that just feel a little bit larger, Like, honestly, I think operations are very fun, and I think, obviously operations can get out of control, but still, it feels like it's very focused on, just basically, the objectives we are trying to complete in those operations. But basically, the point I'm trying to make is 12-player Space Marine 2 apparently is stable as far as the mod goes. So the possibility of seeing modes that maybe can allow for more than 3 players is definitely something we should look forward to being utilized in Space Marine 3. This is honestly, I really hope the devs see this, because just seeing that the game can even support something like this means that the potential is there for Space Marine 3, or hey, maybe even Space Marine 2, add some new modes or something. The potential is there for this game to just feel a lot larger than what we have at the moment. And honestly, I still think operations feel very large. They feel extensive because they're like 30-minute runs sometimes. But ultimately, it's still just 3 guys fighting a handful of chaos or a handful of Tyranids, maybe even larger. But still, if we can get 3 guys into 12 guys, there's really possibility that we can get a handful of enemies to turn into a factor of 4 of a handful of enemies to correctly compare it to the 3 to 12 there. No, regardless, this is very impressive. This is very, very impressive. I want to stop yapping, and I want to go into the clip. There's just a few things I want to talk about with the 12-player Space Marine 2 clips, because I just really hope that it's stable, ultimately. And I do think this definitely can open the eyes of the devs a bit to say, hey, you know what? Maybe 6v6 v6 PvP is possible or something, maybe some sort of like free-for-all PvP mode, or I don't know why I'm going to PvP, but I've seen people talk about Battlefield and stuff with this mod. So ultimately, I would still love to see more players in Horde mode. So the fact that we can see this being utilized means that Horde mode could potentially have more players in the future as well. That would be cool. But okay, let's go into the clip. Let's see how stable 12-person Space Marine 2 really is. Okay, here we go. We have Shrek and the boys. This is 12-person Space Marine. Now, obviously seeing this many players on a team, balance concerns are definitely... Dude, is that a cape? Is that a cape with a power fist? Dude, what? This looks sick. Okay, sorry. I got very distracted. Obviously, balance concerns are definitely a thing to worry about with a team this massive, ultimately, right? I gotta give a shout out to this tactical carrying the chalice. Within, like, there's 12 players here. There's probably like 4 bulwarks. But it's cool. Honestly, the Imperial Fist tactical skin looks so good. Even within all these modded players who look very, very fashionable, the Imperial Fist definitely still can hold up to these. Oh, dude, look, the cape disappeared. The cape disappeared. Unplayable. Wait, no, seriously, what happened to the cape? No, but like honestly, outside of the fashion and how cool the Imperial Fist skins, this does look very impressive. Like, it's actually kind of smooth. It's not like lagging too much. However, I can imagine the tactical player here who was recording probably has a really good rig. If I was to guess, I would say you would need like 32 gigabytes of RAM or something to get this to be this smooth, to be completely honest. I mean, honestly, even Space Marine 2 on my 32 gig laptop started to lag when I had the frames like above like 100 or something. Yeah, that was kind of weird. So I'm just very, very surprised that this is looking as smooth as it is. Is that a chaplain? Oh my god, modded Space Marine 2 is just seriously very impressive. And still, I just want to, I want to connect the dots a bit here. This is still the base game. Like the modders are still building upon the same systems we are playing with. You know what I mean? So even though modders are pulling off some amazing stuff, I have to admit this is still something I expect from Space Marine 3 ultimately. Like as far as building up to something amazing or something very I will say unpredictable. I will say unpredictable. It's 12-player Space Marine 2 is definitely not something I've seen people, ask for. But still, with Space Marine 3, we definitely want to see something build up like that. You know what I mean? Like any sort of larger team game mode feels very good in this game because then you actually feel like a part of an army, rather than just a part of a group. I mean, regardless, I like what we have now. Of course, the 3-player teams. We are able to, interact with our perks a little bit more accurate, I will say. I imagine trying to link up a invigorating icon would be very, very chaotic. Also, you know what? I have to get a little bit skeptical here. I don't see a lot of fighting. I can imagine if the chaos spammed a whole wave at them, and maybe if there was like a sorcerer or something, I can imagine frames and performance overall going a little bit under, but guess what? If it doesn't, then that still means that this is all very possible to see, regardless of how you feel about Space Marine 2. This definitely proves that the game can improve in ways that are like, multiplied. Like the game can seriously get like 3 to 4 times better, just through mods and just through time, and honestly just through playtesting as well, because Space Marine 3 is definitely going to be in a position to build up on stuff like this. And I have to point out that if modders are capable of pulling this off, the very least we can ask for in Space Marine 3 is something similar to what I'm witnessing here as far as large team game modes. Now, obviously, for these operations, it's going to be very limited of the battles they can have because, it's the operations. They are definitely balanced around 3-player teams. They're not balanced around 12-player teams. I'm curious to see if there's a mod that maybe can balance out the mods or the mobs that you can fight, Like, for example, instead of 3 Extremis and Absolute, what if they throw out 12 Extremis and Absolute? 12 Biovores. Yeah, that sounds sustainable. So, see, that's exactly kind of my point here, is this looks great. What I'm taking from this is the fact that this game can handle a lot more than what we know it can handle. I think the devs maybe are on the side of they know the potential of this game, so they're just kind of, making sure they steadily improve it in ways that can actually keep it stable. I can't imagine fights staying at a stable like 60 frames per second. I can't imagine that. But let me know in the comments if you actually tried this, and if you can correct me on that. Of course, we are going to read some comments to see if anyone else has tried it. But yeah, I just wanted to make this video to really emphasize that Space Marine 3 can be a lot bigger than what we have in Space Marine 2. And not to mention, I do think the devs should utilize some of these systems, some of these modded systems a bit more, or in ways that we can see the game kind of take advantage of what modders are doing. Like, to be completely honest, the modders are definitely pulling off some amazing stuff in this game, and they seem to be doing it at a pretty good pace, to the point where I think Space Marine 3 can definitely adapt some of the great stuff we see some mods. So I'm just really hoping the devs are in touch with what the modders are capable of doing, and they are also, paying attention to what the mods are providing to the game and how the game, basically how the game can stabilize these mods. Like, dude, I just have to be honest, like, the devs made a really good base game, and the modders are taking it to the next level. So I'm just really hoping that we can see the game improve in the capacity that we're seeing these mods come out, So just, yeah, I want to see Space Marine 3, I want to see Space Marine 3 adapt more of these mod ideas. However, I am a little bit skeptical about performance of a mod this big. So, like, honestly, like, everyone's everyone's talking about 4-player horde mode. It would be interesting to see an update for that. You know what I mean? It would be interesting to see a 4-player horde mode update, maybe for a different map. Maybe keep a 3-player horde mode for a specific map and a 4-player horde mode for a different map. Maybe a difficulty increase or something. That would be very cool. But yeah, I really hope the devs are definitely in touch with what the modders are able to pull off, because this is a sign of what could be for Space Marine 3. Imagine a Space Marine 3 game with a Battlefield-like PvP and Destiny-like PvE. That would be so sick, doing raids each week, getting new gear, and doing strikes and playing 32 versus 32 PvP. A man can dream. Yeah, so this is definitely the sentiment I've seen around PvP recently, is just that people have really, honestly, the PvP game mode for Space Marine 2 is definitely a little bit underdeveloped. However, PvP still has some potential, and I still think it's very fun to this day to play. PvP, I definitely kind of jump in and jump out casually now. I definitely played it a little bit sweatier when the game launched. But ultimately, I do think a Battlefield-like PvP scenario for Space Marines feels like its own game. I would love to see it. Honestly, if a modder pulled that off, that's just like... that's just goated. Like, honestly, if a modder was able to pull off Battlefield PvP in Space Marine 2, yeah, I would definitely try that out. And yes, that would definitely be insane. That would be on the level of, like, dude, honestly, just make a Space Marine game around that mod, But still, it's definitely something I'm a little bit skeptical of, because I do think that's going to take a lot of effort to pull off, and ultimately, I think what we are getting with operations right now feels really, really good, and I think the devs are delivering in that sense. So I would like to see something like a big game mode, like as far as like adding 12 players. I would like to see that more in a PvE scenario. However, I do understand that the Battlefield PvP scenario for Space Marines would be the best team-based PvP ever created. 100%. I am with you. I am 100% with that. I just think it's going to take a lot of effort, and potentially it would have to be its own game, and maybe we could, see some sort of modders attempt something like that. I could dream, From what I heard, it wasn't that having more than 3 players wouldn't be fun to do. It was they had no idea how to make the game even somewhat challenging to keep players having fun. Oh, okay, this is actually an interesting point. So it's not, okay, so the devs are obviously going to be, aware that they can add in more than 3 players. I'm definitely a little bit silly to suggest that the devs didn't know how powerful their game was. But ultimately, I do think this is a great point. It was that they had no idea how to make the game even somewhat challenging to keep players having fun. Well, it's interesting that you say that, because if Horde mode can have infinite waves, then it can definitely reach to that point where the game starts to balance itself out. But I'm not saying we should have 12-person Horde mode. That sounds insane if we had infinite waves. That's a performance crasher, 100%. But this is still an interesting... mod to kind of gauge the interest of having like just more than 3 players, So hopefully, I do hope the devs understand that there is interest for more players in a game mode. I just don't know if it's for operations. I can see something like Horde mode or some other, side PvE mode that could definitely provide, a opportunity to have a larger team. But ultimately, with operations, it feels very focused. So I do understand why the pacing and the balance is a lot better for 3 players in operations. I mean, it's built around it, right? But still, there's definitely a large interest to see this game kind of expand. It's not even talking about like an expansion or a campaign DLC or whatever. I mean, literally, just make the game larger. Like, I think there is interest in that, and I think the game could definitely benefit from that. But still, the combat is still in a very focused spot, so the game being larger could make combat feel a little bit overwhelming. But still, I think there's definitely a place to have like a larger team in Horde mode, or like, yeah, some sort of like different mode. I think Horde mode is honestly just the easiest way to do it. Like, you can have a 3-person Horde mode, and until you complete that, you can't do the 4-person Horde mode that has unlimited waves. Like something like that, Kind of makes me feel, what is the point? How is the game challenging if there are 12 of you? And where is the fun in a cakewalk? So apparently, from what I've been reading in the comments, it does seem like the mod actually adjusts the spawn rates for enemies. So I mean, I didn't really see much details, but it would be kind of interesting to see if the mod legit does spawn in 12 biovores. That was also a comment as well, and it's probably the most horrifying thing that could happen. 12 Terminators, I will admit, would be spectacular. That would be amazing just to watch and, you know, play, obviously. But, like, just to see 12 Terminators versus 12 Space Marines, just, oh, man, it would be beautiful. That would be such a good battle to see. But, yeah, apparently the game's challenging because the mod, like, adjusts it. This is, oh, yeah, for reference, this is the Astartes mod, I believe. It's just an update that's not out yet. So, the 12-person mod you can't currently play, unfortunately. However, I'm still very impressed. I'm still very impressed that the game can handle that, and not to mention that the fact that they actually balanced they were able to balance the spawn rates around the mod, which is cool. You know what? I have to be very, very honest about this. This is very impressive. I definitely want to try out mods, and even when it comes to modding in games, I think Space Marine 2 right now, when it comes to mods, very underrated. I mean, you can see the type of mods they have, like, for Bethesda games, or even, like, for Elden Ring games and whatever. Elden Ring games, for From Software games. Ultimately, I think the mods that we have for Space Marine 2 can transform the game way more than the mods that we see for other games. Even like Oblivion included, because, like, it's cool that you can change your character into, like, Thomas the Tank Engine, but can you, like, actually, like, change the like core mechanics of the game and have it run, and then also be able to balance the game around it? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I really have a hard time providing an example of what that would look like for Bethesda games or From Software games. But yeah, for, like, I know maybe for some From Software mods, maybe they give you the option to get, like, a companion or something, like someone to follow you. I don't know. Regardless, I'm very impressed with how smooth it looked. I am definitely a little bit skeptical of the performance, but it did look, you know, it did look like it was running stable. So that is 12 players online, like, on that screen. Like, you know, that's still pretty impressive. But yeah, hopefully the game's challenging for the modders that want to run 12 players in an operation. I'm more interested in what this says about the game and what could potentially be coming down the road, because I have a really hard time believing that, you know, the devs aren't interested in exploring larger modes at all. You know what I mean? And not to mention, if the interest is there from people who are, you know, watching the 12-player mod for Space Marine, ultimately, I think that can definitely provide the devs some feedback on how they can approach, you know, larger modes. So honestly, this is just a huge win overall. I know some people want to make, like, a devs versus modders competition, but I honestly think they can build off of each other. You know, the devs delivered the game, the mods improved the game, the devs take the feedback from the mods and apply it to future patches or future games. We will see. But hey, regardless, let me know in the comments how you guys feel about this. I'm actually very excited to see this. I think this basically leaves proof of the potential of the game. 100%. Very impressed that the modders were able to pull this off, so definitely wanted to make a video highlighting this. But yeah, let me know in the comments how you guys feel about larger game modes. Do you think operations for, like, 5 players would feel a little bit too cramped? Do you think 12-player operations feel a little bit too cramped? Do you think the devs will decide to add in a larger mode for Horde mode? Let me know. Thanks for watching.